We have a next speaker with us, Ms. Andrea Fryrear. So she's going to talk about agile marketing frameworks. So as the audience expectation rise, marketing technology gets more sophisticated and the number of channels we need to reach keeps growing. Marketers are discovering that their tried and true ways of working just don't cut it anymore. Fortunately, Agile Marketing holds the key to making marketing work in this volatile climate. But what is Agile Marketing really is? To answer this question on Agile Marketing, we have Ms. Andrea Fryrear, President and Lead Trainer of Agile Ships with us. An early convert to the ways of Agile Marketing, Andrea loves nothing more than seeing a team evolve for shows to high performance. In addition to being a certified professional in Agile Coaching and Certified Agile Leader, Andrea is trained as a Scrum Master and Product Owner. Her most recent books, Death of a Marketer, Chronicle Marketing, Troubled Past, and Charts echoes to a more agile future for the profession. Without any delay, let's call her to tell us more on Agile Marketing frameworks. Thank you, Ms. Andrea. Stage is yours. Please carry on.
Awesome. So, hi everyone. Thanks for being here today. As we heard, we're going to be talking about Agile Marketing frameworks today, and more specifically, the differences and distinctions between the best known, which is Scrum, and one of the more obscure, maybe is not the right word, but less well-known frameworks known as Kanban. So with the marketing teams that we work with at Agile Sherpas, we've started to see more and more hybrid approaches. And so I think it's very important for marketing professionals to understand all of the frameworks and practices that are out there in the world of Agile. So today we're going to ask and answer the question, is it time for Scrum to Scram in the world of marketing? So in the world of software development, Scrum has been the go-to way of managing work pretty much ever since Agile started being used in that profession. So you can see here on this chart, these are the results from the 12th annual State of Agile survey that version 1 puts out every year. And this has been a very steady result year over year. You can see that Scrum is far and away the most popular framework for these kinds of teams. These are results primarily from IT and software groups. Scrum is very much the preferred method. But even in this environment where Scrum was invented, where Scrum was designed to apply and be used, it doesn't always work perfectly. And because many marketers are encountering Agile and Scrum through the lens of IT and software, let's say we're marketing a software product that is created through the use of an Agile framework, we meet Scrum first, as that's our first encounter with Agile. And so we started acting like this guy. If you've ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, this is one of those characters, and he believes that Windex will cure any physical ailment. Whatever's wrong with you, just put some Windex on it and it'll be fine. And marketers have started to treat Scrum this same way. We say whatever problem we might have with our process, we just need to put some Scrum on it and it'll all be okay. But of course, that doesn't always work. Scrum has its problems. It breaks, particularly in the world of marketing, but also in its original home in software and IT. So a couple of ways that Scrum can tend to break down. One is what's known as the Scrummer coaster, like a roller coaster. So we have a project which is represented by this happy little emoji here, and we put it into our sprint, and we are very excited because of course we're going to finish this project within the sprint or the next couple of weeks, because that's how Scrum works. We take work in, we work on it for a cycle of a couple of weeks, and then it's done and we get to move on. And as the sprint goes along, we keep working on this project, but then as the sprint comes to an end, we haven't actually finished it. And so it gets pushed over into the next sprint. But surely we're going to finish it now. So we work on it again and again, some more time, but it gets pushed again. Either we're getting interrupted and not being able to work on it like we planned, or it's turned out to be much larger than we thought. All kinds of things can come up, but the project has not actually gotten finished as we planned and anticipated. Things keep going round and round and pushed from sprint to sprint. We can also see Scrum begin to break down when the sprint cycles start to follow this pattern. Early on, everyone's excited. We've built this beautiful sprint backlog. We've committed and designed this 2-week plan that we're going to stick to, and it's going to be amazing. Everyone's happy. We start working, we're getting stuff done, things are going well. Everyone's pretty happy and chill as we go along. But then once we get about a third of the way through the sprint, we start to realize that we're not on track the way that we thought we were, and things start to get a little worrisome. We're working a little bit longer to try to catch up. People are getting pulled off into other meetings or projects, and now we're starting to get really worried because the sprint is not looking like it's going to be finished the way that we have committed to. We're overworking, we're stressing out, getting shocked at how badly this is going. Some anger may start to appear in the Scrum team and their leaders, and by the end of it, we're just very afraid that Scrum and Agile are not going to work, and things have gone to a bad place. These are very common situations in IT teams, but particularly in the world of marketing, which is why many of the marketing teams that have already transitioned over to using Agile are reporting the use of hybrid frameworks. So the results you see now are from Agile Sherpa's 2018 State of Agile Marketing report. And you can see that unlike the IT and software respondents, most of our marketing respondents say they're using a hybrid approach, and only 18% report actually using pure Scrum. So because of all of this, of Scrum's shortcomings and marketers' tendency to design these hybrids, I want to take time today to introduce you to Kanban practices that can help you go with the flow a little bit better when using Agile in the world of marketing, and help you avoid some of these common pitfalls that can emerge when using Scrum. So 5 core practices of Kanban that we're going to go through here today. The first is to create a visualized workflow. And I should say before we dive into these that Kanban is also very, very flexible. So if you have a team of 1 or 2 or 5, something small, Kanban will work really, really well for you. Or if you have a very large team of 15, 20, 25, Kanban can still work in those environments as well. So it's very flexible and can be applied in a lot of varied situations. So first practice here, the visualized workflow. Now, many people are familiar with Kanban boards. Tools like Trello have made them very popular and very common ways of understanding our work and prioritizing it effectively. But for marketing teams in particular, it's important to take a step back from the basic board, which you may have seen something very simple where it has just to do, doing, and done as the columns. And those are the most basic. And you could certainly start there, but to get the most detailed and accurate view of the kinds of work that we're doing, it's better to have a more specific board. But before you start creating columns and putting up sticky notes and things, we need to take a step back and do something like what you're seeing here, which is just a very basic sketch of how work happens in the team. So what we're looking at here is, where does work come from? Who is asking the team to do work? So there are probably stakeholders outside of the team, maybe people in sales, maybe someone at the executive level who are submitting requests to marketing. And then hopefully someone in marketing is applying a strategic perspective. Someone like a marketing director is helping the team understand how to handle those requests that are coming in. And then we have to sketch out what happens to the work once the team takes it on. What handoffs need to take place? What are the checklist items that need to happen before we can move it along? And then we have where the work goes after it leaves the team. So some teams need to take it through a review process. Some teams need to get it localized or translated. And then some teams have to rely on another team to do the publication or amplification process. Any of those things would need to be documented here in this sketch view. So it's very important to understand too where the workflow should end. Because if you don't have control over the legal review or the translation process or the publication process, those don't need to be represented in the team's workflow because the team can't optimize them. They don't have any control over that part of the process. We want to make sure that, excuse me, that we cut off our workflow in the right spot once we turn it into the actual Kanban board. So we might have review and publish as columns on our board if the team has control over those, but if they don't, we wouldn't want to include them as columns here. So you can see this is a very straightforward example of a board. So we have our backlog, which would be our list of things we need to do, which should be prioritized and ranked. And then once we have enough information about those items that are at the top to start working on them, we would move them to the defined column. Sometimes we have to do fact finding or research or things like that. And once that had happened, we would move it into defined. We're working on it while it's in progress. And then once it's done, it would move to the done column, and then accepted might be ready for publish or at legal review, whatever the description we all agree on as a team is. And the Kanban board is very unique to every team. There's not a standard perfect board, and it's something that should be up for continuous improvement and debate. As the team learns what's working and what's not, they'll evolve this board over time. And you don't want to get it too complicated either. So 10 is about the maximum number of columns you would ever want on a board like this. If you get up more than that, you probably need 2 boards because you're probably trying to document and track too many different kinds of work. Sort of the more advanced view of this is the incorporation of these horizontal swim lanes. So you can see in this example, we've broken out the writing work from the design work from the video work. And this type of view is particularly useful for like a creative services type team or an agency that's working on these kinds of things. And this allows us to see how much work each of those groups are doing. So we get an idea of distribution. This is a particularly useful view if you think you might need to hire additional resources. Then you can say, look how much design work we have pending that we can't get to because we don't have enough designers. Whatever the hire you want to make might be, then you might be able to make that argument more effectively once you have this accurate workflow visualization. And whatever style you use, whatever columns you end up with, whatever the board ends up looking like, remember that the goal of this whole visualization process is to accurately represent how work is getting done so that opportunities for improvement become very clear and apparent. So that's always the goal when we're designing these boards and figuring out how to improve them over time. You want to be having these feeling that your board is so beautiful and giving you so much good information that just makes you happy every time you look at it. The big question that always comes up here at this point is, should I have a digital Kanban board or an analog sticky notes on the wall type board? And unfortunately, there's not a perfect answer here. If you're just getting started, I always recommend starting with an analog board, something that you can just throw up on a wall or a whiteboard. That works best, obviously, if your whole team is co-located and everyone can stand up and look at the board every day. If you're not co-located, then a digital tool is probably going to make the most sense for you. I would start with something very lightweight. Trello is an excellent starting point so that you can sort of get your feet wet and get comfortable documenting things in the board and understanding how it works and what your team actually needs from your tool before you go make a huge investment. Trello may be all that you need forever, or your whiteboard and stickies may be all you need forever. But they give you the opportunity to learn about the process and get into a place where you can be a more informed and intelligent software purchaser when the time comes. All right, so the second component of Kanban that we're going to touch on here are WIP limits, which stands for work in progress. And these are one of my most favorite Agile practices, and whether you're a team of 1 or 100, these can make a huge difference in your work life. So a WIP limit we apply to the columns on our Kanban board, and it's just like it sounds. It's a limit on how much work you can be doing at any given time. So in our super simple board here, we have a team of 4 people who have applied a work in progress limit of 1 to what their team can do. They can, as a group of 4, they can only be working on one thing at a time. But what they've chosen is too low. And we can tell that because they have this slow flow. It takes a long time for work to actually move into the done column, and people on the team are often idle. So even if they can double up and 2 people can work on the item at once, people are going to be bored. If we bump the WIP limit up to 5 for this team of 4, now we've gone too high. And we know that because, again, we'll see that slow flow. It takes a long time for work to get into the done column. But now we have tasks that are idle. So even though something is in the doing column and technically being worked on, it's not actually being touched by a team member. So it's idle, even though it's in the doing column. And people, team members, are never idle. They're busy all the time. This is how we know that our WIP limit is too high. What we want is a WIP limit that's just right and allows us to have a fast flow of work. That's what the WIP limit's power is to help us stop starting on a whole bunch of things and actually start finishing work before we move on to the next item. We'll know that we have things just right when we see that fast flow, when things are actually getting done, when tasks, projects are very rarely idle. They're always being actively worked on whenever they're in progress. And we can have people, individuals on the team, who do have moments of idleness or slack. These are good things. We want people to have a little bit of downtime when they can attend events like this and engage in professional development, when they can attend live events, when they can research a new piece of software that might help them do their job better. All these things that we know we should be doing to become better at our jobs, but we never have time to do. A Kanban system with good WIP limits can create those moments and allow us to actually do those improvements. The other great thing about work in progress limits is they cut down on this really terrible problem known as context switching, which all knowledge workers fall victim to. It's a really terrible issue. And this chart illustrates it in a very clear way, but also a very depressing way. You can see on the far left there, that nice tall green bar shows us how much of our productive time is devoted to a single project. When we only have one thing in progress, all of our time, all of our mental energy is devoted to that one thing. But when you move down to the right, it gets worse and worse. So by the time you have 5 things in progress, you are actually only spending 5% of your working time on each of those things. And the rest of your time, 75% of your time, is lost to jumping back and forth, to switching between those 5 tasks. So you're actually just wasting 75% of your time. It's really kind of depressing because, I mean, who has only 5 things on their to-do list, right? But WIP limits help us to focus on that 1 or 2 most important things, get them done before we move on to something else. So we spend more time on the nice green happy end of this chart and way less time on the wasteful red end of this chart. Okay, so third component of Kanban is work item types. Now this one is a little bit less well known. Like I said, most people know about the visualized Kanban board. WIP limits are not uncommon, but work item types are a little bit more uncommon, but they're really, really powerful for marketing teams that are trying to juggle a whole lot of different kinds of work. So the simplest way to understand a work item type is to think of it as a bucket. We create and label buckets for what kinds of work tend to come into our team. And then each of these buckets has a set of guidelines or rules for how the team will handle it whenever work comes in. So as new work comes in, we don't have to worry about exploring every single tiny piece or project one by one by one. We can just figure out which bucket it belongs in, and that will tell us how to proceed. So one example here. Teams sometimes create work item types based on the level of urgency assigned to work. So we might have a work item type for things that need to be expedited. These would be actual emergencies or emerging opportunities that we need to take advantage of. And maybe the rule for the team is if one of these pieces of work comes into the team, we drop everything and we all work on the expedite item until it's finished. Might be one guideline for that. Then we might have fixed delivery date items. These might be things like a webinar that we're doing. And we've got to have the webinar ready. The slides have to be ready at a certain date. And then we have to work backwards from that because we need emails to promote it and social media promotion and all these things have to happen. And so all those things would fall into the fixed delivery date category, and we would handle them all similarly. Then we might have standard work. People might call it business as usual or keep the lights on. These are things that as marketers we have to keep doing just to stay in place, right? To not fall behind or lose traction with our customers and our audience. Things like keeping social media active, publishing blog posts, those sorts of things might fall into a standard category. And then we have intangible. These are the nice to haves. Things like team building or finding a new piece of software, these would fall into an intangible. And like I said, each one of these would have their own set of guidelines for the team to handle them in their own unique way. And we can add work item types to our visualization to get even more information about what the team is doing and whether they're devoting their energies to the right place. So we could have swim lanes, right? We talked about the horizontal swim lanes. Those could reflect work item types. We might have planned, recurring, and emergency work item types. You can also use the different colored cards that you see here. So if these were sticky notes or index cards, a color could represent a work item type. And this really allows us to know if we're doing the right kinds of work at the right time. So for instance, if on our board here, the yellow cards were representing unplanned emergency type work, we would know that's not a good thing because the team is spending tons of time on this unplanned work and not much time on the strategic, innovative work that it really needs to be doing. All right, so fourth component of Kanban are independent cadences. Now in Scrum, everything is based on the sprint. We identify how long the sprint's going to be, anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, and the whole process hinges on that time box. So at the beginning of the sprint, we plan. At the end of the sprint, we do a review and retrospective, and then we start again. And the whole thing is locked together. But in Kanban, we can break these things out. So we might deliver finished work every day, as often as it's finished. But then maybe we plan every week. Every Monday, we have a planning session. But we do backlog refinement only once a month. And then maybe we have a retrospective every 2 weeks. We can break these things out and put them on their own schedule so that the team can really design an approach that works best for them, as opposed to feeling like they have to follow the sprint guidelines. And this kind of helps get teams out of that scary emoji cycle that we saw, where by the end of the sprint, everyone's really like anxious and upset because they're not going to finish their committed work, breaking up the cadences like this can help solve that problem. This is, however, the reaction from some people, particularly people who currently use Scrum, when I talk about breaking cadences, because it can be very scary. We're going to talk about why time boxes can help and how they can work a little bit later on. But if this makes you nervous, it's okay, and you don't have to break the cadences, but it is sometimes a really good option for your team. All right, so fifth and final piece here, we have the process of continuous improvement. So Kanban is really awesome because you can put it on top of the way you work right now and just start tomorrow. You don't have to change anything. You can apply these components and start seeing opportunities for improvement right away, which is a great, easy way to get started. However, in order to get really good with these practices and to really see the massive benefit of them that's possible, you have to commit to continuous improvement. This is not something that, so while you could apply them all tomorrow and start seeing benefit, you aren't done. You have to keep moving forward in this cycle, right? Identifying opportunities to improve your board, to adjust your WIP limits, to figure out different cadences, all those things need to be up for discussion. And then plan how to actually make improvements, execute that plan, review its outcomes, and then start the whole thing over again. And this is a very agile way of handling work, regardless of what framework you use. Continually improving the process is essential. So we've been talking about Kanban. We mentioned Scrum. But I do want you to know that there's a way to put them together and have them work in harmony, and that's an approach known as Scrumban. And this is actually where most marketing teams ultimately end up. We think of it as having full access to the entire Agile buffet. You understand all the options out there, and you can go pick and choose the ones that work best for your unique context. So Scrumban can look very, very different for different teams, depending on what practices they take. But the general view of it is that it's very pragmatic. So it's based on understandings of the whole system, the whole organization, and we're choosing what works best, not what helps us be better at Scrum or better at Kanban. It's very pragmatic. It allows us to integrate other models and frameworks, so things like theory of constraints, design thinking, systems thinking. Scrumban encourages you to take those in and use them to evolve your practice. It's focused on meeting the organization's needs and not stressing about getting things perfect. So don't worry about having the perfect by the book daily stand-up meeting. Instead, create a meeting that meets your organization's needs. And finally, Scrumban works really hard to give you tools to solve the problems that Scrum reveals. So lots of people complain that Scrum has caused all these problems on their teams. What's actually usually happening is that it's uncovered problems that always existed on the team, but it doesn't necessarily help you solve them. Scrumban and Kanban provide more tools for actually tackling those problems that Scrum can unearth. So it's a really powerful approach. Most of the time in Scrumban, particularly marketing teams, will keep the time box. So they'll maintain that sprint time box, that 2-week recurring cycle, because it makes them comfortable to know this is going to happen now, this is going to happen next. It can also make their leadership and their management comfortable to know that the marketing team is going to deliver something of value every couple of weeks. And I think that one of the best arguments I've heard for maintaining this time box comes from an essay called Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, written by Eli Goldratt, who originated the theory of constraints. He's a very smart thinker. But you can see that he believes that the Kanban system assumes that the environment is stable, which unfortunately in marketing, stability is not really the hallmark of modern marketing. And I think this illustrates that particularly well. So it took 38 years for radio to reach 50 million users. TV did it in only 13 years. And then we have Instagram, which did it in a year and a half. And who knows what's coming next and how quickly it will reach 50 million users. So stability is not really something that we get to enjoy in marketing. So we need a system that allows us to handle this volatility and this uncertainty. So maintaining the time box, keeping the sprint cycle in place can be a very nice and intuitive way to understand the cycles of Agile. And it may help us to handle these unstable environments a little better because the time box is not as sensitive to disruptions, whereas Kanban's continuous flow method can be more disrupted by external factors. So the time box may be useful in Scrumban, or you can keep it with more pure Kanban. The whole point of all of this, right, is to understand all these practices, why they exist, and what purpose they serve, so you can make smart choices and pick the right ones to work for you. All of that said, 4 things you should keep in place no matter what Agile approach you end up with. That's your backlog. That's your prioritized list of to-dos, right, that needs to be always updated, and it always has only one top priority. That's what the team's going to use to choose their work, whether it's Scrum or Kanban. The backlog is their Bible on what is coming up next and what's most important to the business. Keep daily stand-up. Even if you can't have it every day, get as close as you possibly can. This is that quick check-in meeting for everyone on the team to talk about what they're working on and how things are going. Keep that meeting. Keep the visualized workflow. It may not be as detailed as some of the Kanban boards that we looked at before, but you need to have the work documented and out in the open so the team and people outside the team can see it. And finally, keep the retrospective meeting. These are the most powerful meeting in Agile. This is where the team get together to talk about their process, to really hash it out, what's working and what's not, and then improve it over time. So as long as you keep these 4 things, you can basically pick and choose anything else that you want from the world of Kanban and Scrum to design your own custom hybrid. Don't feel like you have to follow some rigid set of rules. So I want to close by telling you a story about a team and an organization that has done this really, really well, that has approached Agile in a very intelligent way and seen some amazing results from implementing it well in their marketing function. So this is Cameron Von Orman. He is, as you can see, the SVP of Product and Solutions Marketing for CA Technologies. Cameron comes from a kind of techie background. He used to manage app development teams at CA before he started moving more into product marketing. And as he started managing more marketers, he thought, my Agile app teams did some really cool stuff. I wonder if those same approaches would work for these marketers that I am now responsible for. And he realized that it was not an exact correlation, right? A group of marketers is not exactly like a group of app developers, both in the types of work that they do and the way that work is structured. So the marketers are used to having these long, year-long marketing campaigns that they can apply. They're often not co-located, whereas the app development teams were usually small and co-located. There were differences. But Cameron thought it was worth a shot. It was worth doing an experiment to figure out if this would actually work. And fortunately for him, around the time that he was thinking all of this, CA bought a company called Rally Software, which made Agile project management tools. And the marketers there had just started experimenting with using Agile. And so Cameron decided to use them as basically his pilot. They were his guinea pigs to see if Agile could work in marketing. He let them continue to try things and experiment for a couple of quarters, and they loved it. Yes, this is working. This is amazing. Agile is the best thing ever. And at that point, he decided it was time to move from that single group. There were about 35 of them at that point, to move from that single group to the whole CA marketing function, which was much larger and more complex. So that was going to involve quite a lot of changes. So they went from that one co-located team to teams around the world. They went from marketers who knew and understood Agile broadly because they had been marketing an Agile project management tool to a bunch of marketers who had no idea what Agile was or why they should care. They went from digital SaaS, software as a service products, to more physical on-premises products. And then they went from a single product, the Rally suite of tools, to multiple products across all stages of development in their life cycles. So it was a pretty big jump. And in order to make sure that it was successful and a viable experiment, Cameron had two sets of criteria that he was evaluating the experiment against. One was, is Agile good for the marketers that he was responsible for? Are they better at their jobs? Are they happier? And two, is it better for the business? Are we actually getting better results? Luckily, they do employee satisfaction surveys at CA very regularly. And so he had very solid data to back this up. And these are the results comparing the marketers' satisfaction before Agile and after. And as you can see, very big positive gains across the board for the marketers. They're more engaged. They're prouder to work for CA. They're way more likely to recommend CA as a place for people to work. They feel more involved in the decisions that impact their work, and they feel much more valued as an employee. And of course, people who exhibit these kinds of sentiment are going to stick around. They're going to stay at an organization. You're not going to have lots of turnover that you have to deal with. These are very, very valuable numbers from a people standpoint. From a business standpoint, things also worked out really nicely. They had a 20% improvement in their pipeline without spending more money. They were now delivering campaigns in 2 weeks as opposed to 2 months on average, and they tripled their win rate for opportunities that were brought in by marketing. So very clearly, Agile was delivering amazing results for them. And so they felt very confident going ahead and moving forward. These, by the way, are other benefits that groups other than CA have reported, other Agile marketing groups from our survey that we did earlier this year. So you can see that in addition to these very measurable impacts that Agile can have on marketing, we also have things like higher quality of work. So almost 47% see that. And then we have productivity as well as alignment on business objectives. So marketing, sales, and the larger business function all work better together in an Agile environment. And then more visibility into project status, which can avoid rework, help the products of marketing be used more broadly across an organization. All kinds of great things coming out of Agile, both within and outside of the specific CA case study. So finally with CA, now that they validated the experiment, they expanded out to have 7 more persistent cross-functional Agile marketing teams serving 5 more business units. So essentially Agile is the only way of working inside of marketing now. So all of this to say, don't be like Gus. Don't assume that you're just going to put some Scrum on it and that it's going to work out just fine. We want to have all the options available so that we can use the right solution for the right process problem and really design an Agile marketing approach that's going to work in your...
Thanks, Ms. Andrea. That was definitely an informative one. So we have, what will the impact of AI be on the marketing industry? And Ms. Andrea, please look on the chat box. You have a first question from Jennifer.
Yeah, I think that AI is going to continue to push us to be more innovative, more connected to our customers, because they are going to expect more sophisticated and personalized messaging based on that new technology. And actually, I think that Agile is a great way to deal with things like AI, chatbots, machine learning, any of these things that are emerging as technological disruptors for marketing, because Agile teams are way better. So I think that it's AI right now, and in 2 or 3 years, who knows what the next thing that's going to mess us up will be. And Agile teams will be able to harness those changes and take advantage of them instead of feeling like they're always behind the curve.
Okay, here we go. The next question: how should you use data to inform content marketing strategy?
Well, I think that the short answer is that data has to be at the heart of everything that we do, in content marketing in particular. But there does need to be a balance there. So the data can come from a qualitative as well as a quantitative place. So seeing what sorts of reactions you get from your target audience is just as important as things like click-through rates and time on page and subscription rates. I think there needs to be a good balance there. But if you are just drafting an initial content marketing strategy, then I think data's got to be there hugely. So things like keyword research, so you understand that you're going after the right keywords early on. That, of course, has to be connected to who you're trying to reach in the first place, so understanding your audience. But I don't think you have to spend months and months on some perfect persona design or audience investigation. I think there's a lot that we can learn from social media and from general hypothesizing, and then if you can set up some agile experiments. So we're running a couple of weeks, whether it's content marketing strategy, email, social, any of those things just function better when we're not committing to this massive plan or this perfect strategy, but we're instead understanding that we're going to learn, we're going to evolve, and things are not going to stay the same forever.
Okay, we have a next question from Ms. Nirmala Mehanathan. Can agile marketing be used in blogging?
Yes, absolutely. When I first started years ago, when I first discovered agile marketing, I was a content marketer and used it as a single contributor to manage all of my blogging work, as well as I was doing ebooks and white papers, case studies, all those things. And so I would create my own individual board for the content I was creating. And then people who were waiting on me for things could see what I was working on and what I was likely to be working on next. And it really helped them see how my workload was impacting my output. And if they came to me with an emergency that wasn't really an emergency, it was easier to tell them, let me finish what I'm doing and things log on your own blog or personal branding reasons. There's an amazing book called Personal Kanban. I'll type it in the chat thing here so you can see the title. But it is an amazing book for using a lot of these practices we just talked about as a single team of one, basically. Like that.
Okay, we have another question from Jennifer. How interactive content will change the future of content marketing?
Oh, yeah, interactive. Really, it's just like every other innovation that's come along. Personalization, all those things have just made people expect more from us as content creators and brands. They expect us to be very sophisticated in what we offer to them, but also not creepy in everything that we know about them. So that balance is going to continue, but interactive content is just one more kind of arrow in our quiver of ways that we can deliver really strong value, good at evaluating the options that are out there and choosing the ones that help us meet our objectives and deliver outstanding audience experiences instead of chasing the next shiny object that's out there.
Great. And one more audience riser question, Mr. Nate. How should a startup promote its product with content marketing?
Like I said, I'm a content marketer from way back, and I think everybody should use content marketing for just about everything. But for a startup to promote a product, I think that you've got to find out where your audience is, like what sorts of content they like to consume. Are they readers? Do they like long form written content? Are they podcast listeners? Do they prefer video? Are they at live events? Where are they? And then figure out how to connect with them there so that you're making the right kinds of content. But then it's also going to be very important to niche down to a specific enough place that you can really make a difference. So if you are creating some sort of, I don't know, let's say you're doing like a...
Okay, thanks, Ms. Andrea.